Okay, well, I just want to start off where we left off last week. So, you were having a hard time struggling with all kinds of things, and I told you to go somewhere and take care of your artist self. Did you do that?
I did. Yeah.
How did
I
that go?
um it it went great. So I did that 2 days ago, I guess. I woke up, had to do a couple things first, and then I put my phone at home, grabbed my wallet and my journal, hopped on the bus and rode it out to Powell's City of Books, which is a big giant bookstore in downtown Portland. And I committed to staying there for a minimum 90 minutes. I think I ended up close to 2 hours, and no phone, no nothing. I didn't leave the building and just stayed there, and then walked out and realized I did not know how to get home and didn't have a phone to figure it out. So I had to do a little bit of problem solving, but it ended up being fine. And I found a bus that took me home, and that was that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Uh, Tell me more about did you find it? Um, did it bring anything up that was interesting, or was there any sense of discovery in this? What did you
Yeah.
learn, if anything?
No. So part of me doesn't even want to talk about this because we've just talked about it so much, but I can't not talk about it because it ended up being so significant. But there was something really dramatic about not having my phone with me for many hours. And it's annoying. We've just said it over and over that it's such a big deal to be away from the phone, but it is. And it was just a very different experience. I genuinely don't think I've ever traveled somewhere or left the house in a long, long time without my phone. So that itself was pretty interesting. So part of it, or part of the experience, was just having some of that throttle down period where I just have to like accept that, oh, I want to look this up, but I can't, or I should check my messages, but I can't, and whatever. So like I ended up deciding to not start the 90-minute timer until my brain calmed down a little bit. One of the things you had told me to do is to be present and just consider like live in the moment, not be thinking about what I need to do later and everything. And so I was actually having a really hard time with that process. So I figured, okay, I'm going to let myself think through some of these things. There was some work stuff that was really on my mind, the discussions we were having. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go ahead and try and get that stuff sorted. And once I feel a little bit calmer, then I'll say, okay, my 90 minutes starts now. So that's why it ended up being more like 2 hours, because it took me a good 20, 30 minutes of even taking the journal and writing things out to get some of those thoughts out. And then once that happened and I'm starting to settle in a little bit, it started to feel a lot better. Like there was this sense of, okay, I'm here. I'm in this bookstore. What do I want to do? I can drink coffee and sit around and people watch. I can read a book. I can write in my journal. I can do whatever I want. I can just wander around the bookstore. But it took a while for my brain to really adjust to the idea that I'm here. I can do whatever I want. I don't have an agenda, and I'm here for a good while. I don't just need to distract myself for 10 minutes. I'm here for the next 90. And that was like an interesting transition that had to happen. I wound up, I don't know, it was interesting. I wound up sitting around and just kind of watching different people. You were here not that long ago. I don't know if you saw him, but there is this guy, and he's like a little bit famous. I've seen him just on the internet sometimes, but he sits in the Powell's coffee shop kind of seating area, always at the same table. Every time I have ever been there, weekday, weekend, morning, evening, doesn't matter. He's always there. So he must just be there pretty much open to close. And he does this sort of performance art type of thing where he has like this folded tissue paper that he kind of bats around in the air and has floating. And then it's kind of a magic trick type of thing, but he think he has some kind of like string that you can't see going from his hat to the table or something like that, to where it'll sort of levitate the tissue paper in the middle. It's really cool, and he just is doing this the whole time. And I've never been there without seeing him, and I've never seen him where he wasn't actively doing this kind of performance art. So it just seems like this is a person who does this all day, every day. I don't know if people tip him or if he sells things. He had some like handcrafted, like origami type art. So maybe he's selling stuff. I'm not sure. But it was kind of interesting to think that just to sit there and observe this person who had chosen to spend their life this way by all appearances. And I mean, I've seen him there 8 years ago. So as far as I know, this is like his plan. But I don't know. It made me kind of think a little bit about me and how busy I am, or the ambitions that I have, or how I can feel unsatisfied with a lot of things and think, oh, it's, I'm gonna be happy when I accomplish X, Y, or Z, or my life has meaning only if I do these things. And to kind of just observe somebody who clearly didn't make that choice was an
Yeah.
interesting contrast.
Did you end up with anything that you felt like excited to do or to look into, or questions that you wanted to answer somehow, or little projects that you wanted to go work on? Did it give you any sort of motivation in any direction?
Yeah, well, in the process of trying to decide what I wanted to do, at first I felt this sort of pressure of thinking, I have to have some kind of eureka moment here. This has to be
Mhm.
this important thing, and I've got 90 minutes, which is long, but it's not that long. And am I gonna? I just was like worried that I wouldn't get enough out of the experience. And then it
Yeah.
just kind of occurred to me, like, dude, you can come back. You can do this again. You can do this every day if you want to. You can spend time by yourself and just be in the present moment. It's not like the door is about to slam shut again and it never happens. So that was itself kind of an interesting realization. And what I ended up spending a lot of my time doing was I picked up this kind of philosophy psychology book. It was the number one best selling nonfiction book, at least at Powell's. I don't know how widespread it is. So maybe this is super popular and everybody knows it already, but it was from these two Japanese authors. It was called like The Courage to Be Disliked or something like that. And it was I don't know why the title is relevant. I read a fifth of the book. But it's this sort of philosophy psychology book about Al Adlerian philosophy, and it was pretty interesting. It's presented in this very, I don't want to say pop psychology way, but it's like a very friendly thing. It's presented as this conversation between this young, unhappy philosophy student, seeker of knowledge type person. He goes up to the guru in his study or something, and he spends five nights with the guru arguing with him back and forth. So it's this conversation style. But the it ended up I just picked it up because I was like, I don't know, we'll just grab something. But it ended up feeling more relevant than I was expecting. It was basically this argument for um I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this right. Oops. uh Teleology versus um etiology. Man, I wish I'd remember these words better. Basically, it's this um one of the fundamentals to Freud and his way of thinking, and a lot of the psychologists in that vein, is kind of like looking for a root cause for your current state or your current behavior, saying you are afraid to go outside because your parents didn't love you, or you got bullied at school or something like that. So that's like the reason for your current state. And then the teleological um, thinking is like the past doesn't really matter. It's not something like you're not trying to connect the dots and figure out the reasoning. You just look at your current state and consider, what choices you're making, or what components of that there are that are causing your current behavior. And it has this implicit assumption that you do have the ability to change any of those things, and it's not something that is determined by what has happened before. And one of the examples in the book or the discussion is like how we often think of anger as the driving factor behind doing something or making a choice. The example is the the younger guy in the book. He's somewhere at a coffee shop, and someone spills coffee on his jacket, and he gets really upset and yells at the waiter and says, look at this, I just bought this shirt, you're a jerk, and whatever, and gets angry. He's like, I couldn't control it, it just happened. And the philosopher points out that no, the anger allowed you to do something that you wanted to do. You created anger in this situation in order to assert yourself. And he points out that you can see this example rang true. I imagine it does for many people, but you remember being a child and your mom being angry and yelling at you, and you're in trouble, and she's red-faced. And then the phone rings and she picks it up and goes, hey, how's it going? And like has this sort of pleasant, bubbly conversation, and then hangs up and goes right back to being angry. And the thinking is that the anger is a vehicle for doing something that you want to do. And anyway, not to get super sidetracked into this book I read, but it was an interesting thing to sit and think about, especially when I just had no real expectations for what I was gonna even do while I'm there. And so I was just kind of thinking about that as I wandered around, and thinking about how that might fit in with the way I think about myself and the choices I make, my personality, the way I am, and how maybe that's not as fixed as I might have thought.
Well, it's interesting that you end up in that place because it's kind of coming from the same exact place that I've been at for
Yeah.
a while now. And it's really kind of hard to connect all these things, but they're all kind of connected. And when I was telling you to go to the bookstore or to go somewhere and not think about anyone else and not think about like going anywhere or being attached to anything, it's like just be there and
Mhm.
think about only you. And what I mean by that is just pay attention to how you feel, really. It's
Yeah.
not like,
Yeah.
but I was going to say it's not being selfish, but in a way, it actually is in a very, very healthy way that I think gets a bad rap nowadays. Like, you're supposed to be selfless and always live for other people or whatever, and that's how
Mhm.
you truly live or whatever. But I think a lot of us are making the mistake of interpreting that the wrong way. But anyway, the the idea of your life as a story, like the story you tell yourself, when I was young, this happened, and that's why I am the way I am.
Right.
It is. I I'm trying to unravel a lot of the things that I have told myself over the years.
Yeah.
And the more I can do things like go to a bookstore and just be there and not feel attached to other things, the more that the story of my life just kind of fades away. And
Mhm.
I am just me. And it's kind of woven into the whole Artist Way book as well, in that the Artist Way is typically about or mostly about overcoming the artist's block or the writer's block or the block of creatives or anyone who does anything. And it's sort of unraveling those things that keep us from doing stuff. And a lot
Yeah.
of it is centered around the story that you tell yourself. So if I'm doing a drawing and I make a mistake, my brain starts kicking into, well, you'll never be good enough and all those cliche things that it says. And that all comes from the story part of my life. It all comes from years of me telling myself something.
Mhm.
And, 98% of it is not true. It's just a, th- a thing that I've crafted.
Mhm.
And as I've started to go on those types of, what she calls the artist dates or what you went on, just to go to the bookstore like normal people used to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more I've been doing just those types of things where I really consciously not or don't think about other people, don't think about where I have to be, the taxes I have to do or whatever, and I'm just there And I'm watching people like the little performer guy, and you're just there in discovery mode. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, a book. I'll read this book. And you're not trying to meet some sort of agenda. You're not trying to answer to your own story that you've crafted. You're just
Mhm.
there being the you that is untainted by years of you telling yourself who you are. You're just there. And I think it's one of the most healing things. It it's not some giant revelation. It's not some
Mhm.
like my entire life has changed. It's just like a simple, oh yeah, I'm just me.
Yeah.
And like that seems to be the answer recently, I guess. And did it not help you get out of your rut a bit? Or I mean,
I don't
I'm not looking for 100% like, oh yeah, I'm totally healed and everything's great because I went to the
no, no,
bookstore for an hour and a half. It's like,
well, no, I don't want to oversell it because that just feels like me being silly and excited. But so I did this in the morning and then came back home and ate lunch and uh, I felt tired, and so I laid down and just went to sleep and took a nap, which sounds like a thing that is not hardly even worth talking about. But I have not laid down and taken a nap in, I don't know, a year, 2 years, like many years. The only times it's happened has been some kind of strange circumstance, like I only got 2 hours of sleep or whatever. Like I slept okay, and I think it's interesting, and I bring it up because I felt relaxed. Like normally what happens when I'm tired is I start to look for ways of stimulating my brain. Like I start watching YouTube or just kind of doing stuff that, gets me distracted and whatever. Like the fatigue presents in me seeking out uh just internet junk basically. Whereas this time on Friday, I felt tired and I felt relaxed and calm, and I felt like, man, just laying down and going to sleep feels like a really nice thing to do. And so I did, and I had no craving for an electronic device to kind of have in whatever, I got to watch Twitch while I try and fall asleep. It was like, no, I feel calm and I just want to go to sleep. And so I did, and it was great. And then I woke up feeling really good. And I've had just the general desire to find those stimulating things, or that discomfort that I often find with sitting down to read a book, or just going on a walk with nothing with me, like that craving for stimulation and inability to be calm and do something sort of boring was like dramatically different. And really since then I've been very comfortable just leaving my phone in a drawer for the day, and it's felt really really different. And again, I don't want to bring it only back to like the phones are bad and I use my phone too much, but I can't help but talk about that at least some because it was so different. But even beyond that, just the general feeling of it felt like something kind of snapped or got disrupted by committing to this, what ended up being almost 3 hours, I think, of like complete just me, no concern with obligations type of experience, to where I just came back feeling a lot calmer and a lot more able to think about what I wanted to put my attention on rather than what I felt like I had to put my attention on. And it gave me perspective on, all of those things that I care about and want to work on. So yeah, it ended up being fantastic, like really, really good.
well, I think it was last week, and I have an example of me doing this too. But I think last week I was telling you, or I guess the last two times, but telling you to try the morning journaling from the
Mhm.
Artist Way book. And your reaction I thought was interesting. Not in the fact that you said, no, I don't want to do that, but you said, I forget the exact words, but like, I already have a bunch of stuff, like really time consuming things, and I don't have time to write 3 pages. But you were also that entire episode talking
Yeah.
about how you were wasting all of your time on Reddit and not doing anything productive, and you were just feeling awful. But
Mhm.
you were so uptight about adding anything else in there. Like writing 3 pages? No, 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 I don't have time for that. I have to be productive, but let me spend an hour telling you how I'm not productive. And I only understand this so well because a couple years ago, you suggested doing a little meditation challenge,
Mhm.
and I got angry. And it was meditating for 10 minutes a day or something like that.
Mhm.
And it made me angry because I'm trying to stay in control, and the idea of letting go for 10 minutes was just infuriating. And I mean, I say that in the episode, but that's like the culmination of going way too long without the trip to the bookstore,
Mhm.
or just the day where you focus on yourself. You go the complete opposite direction, become obsessed with the story of who you are, and you're always productive and you always get things done, and you have to do this and this and this in order to, I don't know, you become so tense and controlling.
Mhm.
And I think this is kind of the counterbalance to that attitude is to just totally let go of
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Um,
It made me think about Dr. K's kind of prescription for the dopamine addiction type of stuff. We've talked about this on the show, and I'm sure everyone's aware because it was a super trendy thing. Still is, I guess. But a lot of people do this like dopamine detox where you spend a day or some amount of time totally bored and depriving yourself of everything, and it's supposed to kind of reset your dopamine sensitivity. And for all the silliness that floats around, I really liked Dr. K's take on it, where he kind of argues that it just doesn't make all that much sense. One, the literal thinking of dopamine and removing it from your system is not really how it works at all. But then also, from what we know about other parallels, abstaining for 24 hours is not meaningful, and how really, if you wanted to kind of change your relationship with these things that are stimulating, you should do something more like what he called intermittent fasting, where you would or time restricted feeding, but feeding in this case is like your usage of technology and things that are very stimulating. So he tried this and talked about it, and I thought it was really cool. But he set up some kind of plan where he only has access to technology for 6 hours a day or whatever it is. And so in the morning, he has to start by just writing things out and using printed paper and books and things like that, or planning whatever. And then like the clock starts and he does all this stuff, and then it's these hours of calm, and you can read, you can go for walks, you can hang out with people, that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that's what I'm planning on doing, but it's an interesting idea in that maybe there's uh, thinking through this, thinking, man, this is really great, I feel so much better, like dramatically better after having done this little date with myself kind of thing, thinking I would love to feel this way all the time. And I thought, well, I could do this, like literally this or something similar once a week, but also it might be nice to try and figure out something where every day I have these long periods of time where things are calm, and I'm in this state of mind where I don't feel like I'm having to battle constant urges to seek out stimulation and whatnot. So all that to say, I see the value. I'm still not totally convinced that morning pages is necessarily the thing I want to do, but I agree with your point, like that sort of resistance or that clinging to, no, 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 I need every minute. I have to be so, in
yeah.
control and productive, and nobody's going to take this time from me. But then at the end of the day, like, what are you really doing? It's easy enough to waste time doing garbage activities, and somehow that doesn't seem to be so upsetting. So anyway, I I'm kind of thinking about all of that stuff and just trying to think through like what real changes could happen to kind of help that or reinforce that or something.
We go back a little bit to, I'm changing topics a little bit, but earlier you were saying, or you just mentioned the title, I guess, which is the book you found, The Courage to Be Disliked.
Yeah, which again, I don't know how Adlerian philosophy um, requires that you have the courage to be disliked. I've only read a fifth of the book, but yes, that
Well,
was the book.
whatever. And
Yeah,
I'm just referring to the title, not
yeah,
anything in the book. But
yeah.
I was listening to this interview with Guillermo del Toro, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, he didn't really go in depth into it at all, but he just kind of passively mentioned that this was a theme in one of his movies. Uh, Disobedience as a virtue.
Hmm.
And I absolutely love that. The ability to be disobedient, or the bravery to be disobedient, or the bravery to be disliked, or to do things that no one else is agreeing with, and to follow how you feel. And that is a theme that I have been mulling over in my head for quite some time. Like going to work, or trying to explain what I'm trying to do with my art and my life and my independent art business and all that stuff, trying to explain that to other people. It is very, very rarely understood. In fact, it's most often kind of, I'm looked at very strangely
Yeah.
or doubtfully, and people just don't get it. In fact, a lot of the things we talk about on here, either I do a bad job explaining it, or people just don't understand, or it doesn't make any sense. I don't know, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of times where I'll say something and then someone says they disagree, or they just don't see it, or whatever. Not just on here, but in my real life and everywhere.
Yeah.
And so often it affects me. Like I want to be understood. I want people to support
Mhm.
me in what I do. And there's a lot of support from people, my friends and everywhere. But very often I just get looked at like I'm insane. And I'm tired of that. And I'm tired of letting it hold me back, I guess. I'm tired of it affecting me to the point where I talk myself out of something.
Yeah.
And so that's led to, me launching a little art store, or my little, shop on Etsy or whatever. And I wrote my first rough draft for my Patreon page, and
Mhm.
I'm taking significant steps towards my independent artist life that I've always wanted, whether or not anyone else agrees with me or believes in me or understands me or anything. And it's not like I'm getting a bunch of hate from people. It's this shift in mentality in my head of just, I don't want to obey other people. I don't care anymore if people are looking at me like, no, you should stick with, you know, a
Mhm.
secure job, or you should stick with this or that or whatever. I'm just like, fuck it. Like, I'm doing what I want to do, and fuck everyone else. I don't care anymore. And I don't know. The seeing disobedience as a virtue just kind of rings true, or the bravery to be disliked, or whatever the title was. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's
The,
all.
the courage to be is like, yeah,
Courage.
one of, not to make the whole podcast about this book that I happened to read, but it did end up being interesting. One of the sort of examples is this, you know, guy is talking about um, the, I don't know, some friend of his or something, where the guy wants to be a writer and he says, well, I'm trying to write this novel, but I can't finish it because I don't have enough time, or my job is, I have to work too much, I have a wife and kids and this sort of stuff, and so I just can't quite get it done. And the philosopher guy is sort of arguing that, that feels like a causative thing where, oh, you don't have enough time so you can't finish the book, obviously. But his argument is, well, maybe that is a excuse or a way of thinking that has been formulated to prevent you from doing this thing,
Mhm.
because actually writing a novel is, one, very hard, and two, very scary, because it's very nice to have this fantasy in your head that, oh, I could be this thing, but for this circumstance that is somewhat out of my control. Like, surely I would be this great novelist, and that would be my life, but something prevents me from doing it. And in reality, actually doing it is very different, because there's every possibility that you kind of fall on your face or realize that, no, that's not, it's not just the time that's preventing me from doing this. And often, I mean, we've even kind of made similar observations before, how there's a big difference between living with the fantasy of achieving your dreams and then actually trying to do something you really care about and realizing, oh, maybe I'm not the closeted genius that I thought I was, and all of that, right? It's very different and it's much scarier, but it was an interesting thing to kind of look at and think through. And I think often enough, the sometimes the reasoning isn't even that explicit. The sometimes that feeling of like, oh, maybe people think you should invest in your stable job. Maybe part of you thinks you should invest in your stable job. Like whatever the narrative that is assembling in your head, it's worth maybe not respecting that narrative too much, or maybe realizing that, like you said, the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you do and what you can and can't do, maybe it doesn't matter where they come from, and maybe they aren't even like, maybe they're a product of you having some desire to not do this thing, and so you've kind of created the story in order to enable you to do that or make that choice.
Yeah. I hate to bring it up again, but yeah, they mention that a lot in The Artist Way. And one of the ways to try to kind of overcome this is to really dig into the benefits of not doing the thing you want to do.
Mm,
So you write, 3 pages in the morning about what it is that you like about the fact that you have to go to work and you can't work on the thing that you want to do, or the fact that you don't have time. What are you benefiting from in that? And you can fill up the page. Well,
yeah.
I don't have to make any mistakes. I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to take risks or anything. And you can end up with a lot of benefits
Yeah.
to you giving that excuse every time. And it's interesting.
I like that a lot. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So one thing I have found, though, I have no idea how long we've been talking. So I don't know how much longer we have. But
I don't either.
okay. One thing I have found is one, yeah, putting yourself out there is extremely painful and difficult, and it's very scary. And I am encountering that just about every day or every week when I'm posting stuff, and it is scary. Like it hurts and it's scary. But I also have found that once I I'm gonna explain it as if I'm over this hurdle, but I'm not, and I never
Okay.
ever will be.
Yeah.
But once you kind of get used to the idea that you're just failing in front of people, you get over it a little bit, like
Yeah.
just a little bit. Or you get used to the fact that you're going to fail in front of everyone and you're not just going to hide it. So, I'm going to open a store. People are going to buy stuff and they might hate it, but whatever, because I have to live publicly. Or
Yeah.
I'm going to do this drawing, I'm going to post it, and people are not going to like it as much as I want them to. And that's fine. Or, whatever it is, it's going to hurt, but it's going to hurt in front of everyone. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of my life now. And it's a little freeing in a way.
Mm-hmm. I have two thoughts in response to that. One, I had the strangest realization. It's so dumb, the other day, but we've talked about it many times. It was part of the underpinnings of the podcast, but my house has lights from IKEA that you can control with automated timers in the app and whatnot. But for some reason, it occurred to me that I can make all the lights in my house go off if I touch my phone in 3 spots at any moment. If I go to the bottom of the phone and swipe up and then tap on where the icon is and then tap on the off button, all the lights in my house go off. And I don't know what it is about that is so trippy to me, but somehow just removing if you just imagine the black screen of the phone, like forget the pixels that are colored underneath, you just have this little slab of glass and you touch it in 3 spots and the lights turn off. And that extends to all kinds of things. Like I've heard the joke made on the internet, like if you touch your phone in the right spots, a pizza shows up at your door or whatever. Like, you selling your artwork it's like if you just move your hand in the right ways, you create this image that people ascribe meaning to and interest in. And then, you setting up an eBay store or an Etsy store is like just clicking, wiggling the mouse around and clicking in the right spots. Like there is something very surreal about that, where you're not climbing a mountain, you're not lifting a boulder, you're quite literally just like touching things that are attached to your computer. And something about that like gives me discomfort. Like I'm the one ascribing so much meaning to this. It's at
Right.
the end of the day, there's not much here.
It's
And
the story.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
building up the
exactly.
story.
It is the
And
story. If you think in like very literal terms, it ends up being like just kind of simple things that feel meaningless in isolation. So there's every opportunity to kind of think uh, less about the story that you're creating for yourself.
Yes, my mantra recently has been lower the importance and find the wonder. And
I like that.
if it sounds a little silly, it might be, but I've also been trying to make peace with sillier things and not take things too seriously, which seems to be helping a lot. So
Yeah.
when I start getting really worked up or slipping into that controlling mindset for art or whatever it is, you try to lower the importance and you find the wonder.
Mhm.
So it's really not that big of a deal. It's just the story I'm telling myself. And what is the one part of this thing that I can discover something in, or that I can become a little obsessed with or fall in love with? Where's the
Yeah.
wonder? It's
Yeah.
like, where's the book in the bookstore that I want to pick up,
Right.
or the performer that I want to watch, or whatever?
Um, yeah. And along those lines, the second thing I wanted to respond with, we've noticed that whatever you happen to be interested in, no matter how trivial, tends to become your lens that you look at life through. And so that for me right now is Elden Ring. As I mentioned, I've been playing last week. So here we go. I have been playing the game. It's very difficult. They have these really difficult bosses where you encounter the boss for the first time and they just like one shot you and you're dead with some bullshit like fire attack that covers the whole arena. You're like, this is messed up. And so you have to like continue to fight them and start to notice their movement patterns and learn what needs to be done in order to navigate them. And so I've been enjoying it, but it's one of those games that people take ridiculously seriously, and they will basically dedicate their whole life to playing it. And there's people who will speed run the games, where they can, beat the whole game in an hour and 4 minutes or something, or they do like no hit runs where they can beat all the bosses and never take a hit, and just wild stuff. And so there's kind of the initial reaction is, wow, some people are just so much better at this game than I am. I'm just not as skilled of a human as these people are. But I was watching some Twitch streams. I was watching this guy and he's like working on a speed run that he's going to try and do for uh you know whatever it's called, GDQ, the Games Done Quick show or whatever. And it's like he's doing, he called it like learning a script for a certain boss. And so he has these moves figured out that he wants to do or thinks he can do in order to beat this boss. And so on day one of the stream, he just runs up to this boss, tries to execute the moves, messes it up or doesn't get something quite right, and he dies. And then he just starts again and goes again. And like I'm watching this guy for 10 or 20 minutes and I'm like, wow, this is so boring. This is crazy that this guy is just sitting here for hours. I open up the stream the next day after he'd already been on for 3 or 4 hours. He's on the same boss. He's like one attack further along in the script, just trying to get through this one boss. And he's got, I think there's 165 bosses in Elden Ring. So he's 165th of the way there almost after 2 days. And you're just like, wow. But what was cool was just to recognize that the guy is going through exactly the same process that I go through as just a brand new player to the game, which is you just kind of make observations and you figure things out one piece at a time, and you allow that part of you that can recognize patterns and execute sequences of button presses, like you allow that to progress as that conscious part of your mind just steers things and observes and kind of gives instructions down into that like lower level part of you. But it was something, again, it's silly, it's the thing I happen to be interested in, But there was something kind of cool about seeing, the world's best Elden Ring players trying to work on this no hit speed run that just seems miraculous, and realize like it's all the same. They're doing the same stuff. There's really nothing superhuman about it. They've got the right mindset. They're dedicating the time, in this case a lot of it. But it's like, oh yeah, you can just do that. They're selling art and making great art is the same thing. You just learn how to do it, and then you go through all the steps, and maybe there's a lot, and maybe it's time consuming, but ultimately that's all it is. Like, magic does not exist in the world. We won't admit to it, but we usually think that it is. We think that some
Yeah.
people have magic in them and they can do things that other people can't. And like, of course, people have different abilities, but ultimately it's all kind of just that.
I don't know how to say this, but because it's all the same, right? Like you're watching these Elden Ring players, they're the best in the world, and it's just sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
You fail, and then you get better, and you make observations, and you try to correct your stuff and whatever. So, in theory, sort of, we're all sort of the same, right? Like baseline, we're kind of the same. So if you're not telling yourself that story that you've made up about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you're just kind of like everyone else. And
Yeah.
and that is extremely freeing in that you can learn this thing too. You can do whatever it is you're thinking about if you can let go of what you think you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not as profound as I want it to be, but
No, I think that it is. I mean, it's not. I think that often the thing that prevents us from accomplishing something we want to do is some form of self sabotage. And it's a very hard thing to feel like, yes, that's what's happening. That's what's preventing me from doing my things, is I'm sabotaging myself. But if you look at other people, it's much easier to see. Maybe because of the perspective, maybe because of the detachment, but very often you look at, people in a relationship where the relationship isn't working out, or in a job, or trying to pursue a hobby, or who knows, right? But very often, especially if it's something that you do feel good at or know something about, like teaching music, right? You get to a point where you feel pretty good about your abilities and you start teaching people, and so often you watch somebody really struggle and they think that there's something wrong with them or there's some circumstance working against them, and you just see so obviously, like, no man, if you could just get over yourself, or stop with this destructive thought pattern, or just focus on what you need to do to get better, and stop thinking that it's some lack of, midi chlorians in your bloodstream that aren't letting you do it, you would do pretty well. And it's easy to see externally, but it's much harder to think that way yourself. But by definition, it's got to be you, because that's how everyone sees it. So yeah, I think getting to that point of humility and just accepting, like, I'm just a normal person, I'm not made of magic, is a little bit tough, but also very freeing, where you can just think, you know what, probably could do pretty well if I can get over myself and just do the thing.
that was very much my battle today. I I really ran into some issues for the first time in kind of a long time
Mm,
today, and I handled it well though. I
yeah.
I mean I was getting real worked up, real angry, real upset, and yeah, I mean it. I begin to feel like I am a failure in this area, like drawing this specific type of
Hmm.
thing. It's like, why can't I do it? I've tried so hard. I'll never get it. Whatever. Like you get wrapped up in the story
Yeah.
of yourself, and then I knew enough to get away from it. I went for my run, and I just tried to focus
Yeah.
on being there, whatever. When I
Mhm.
came back, I was like, "Oh, yeah." I touched the phone in a few areas. Uh, in other words, I put a few scratches on a page,
Yeah.
and that's it. Like, that's the end of what it was. It wasn't this big
Yeah.
I don't know. So it helped me get over myself, and I'm kinda over it right now. I haven't redone it yet, but I'm hoping my brain is in a better spot now.
And I also think I think sometimes it's good to kind of push a little bit and say, all right, I'm just gonna grind a little and try and get through this, and then I'll feel good. And then it's good to just recognize when now is not the time, and for whatever reason that I don't necessarily know, I'm not doing well with this. And again, to use the Elden Ring example, so many times I have fought a boss and just felt like I was close or whatever, and I just, try again and again and again, and then finally convince myself to just stop, come back to it the next day, and it's like beat him on the first try. That happens so often. You're like, sometimes you just need to like let things sit for a while, let the other parts of your brain work on it, and take a breather. So
Alright, well, let's let this podcast sit till next week.
yeah, sounds good. All right, we'll talk to you then.